Vaulted is a new sports prediction app that turns your opinions into facts. You can store all of your predictions and hot takes in your vault now and forever. Challenge your friends, keep track of the results, and prove that you are, in fact, the smartest. Vaulted will also be releasing more than 50 pools during the NBA playoffs. So download the app at the link below for your 3-month trial. Store your predictions now and keep them forever.
Today's episode is presented by our partners at Underdog Fantasy. Use code FIELD, F-I-E-L-D, to get a 100% deposit match up to $100.
Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, AJ Guyton, back with my man, Austin Platt, and we are here to discuss the last week, kind of a difficult week for Indiana basketball, as you know, both teams fall to Miami Hurricanes programs in different fashions. But we're here to discuss our men's program, and what we haven't discussed the tournament as a whole, starting with the first game. So first of all, how's it going, man? Are you back on campus or are you still on spring break?
We're back on campus. A tough pill to swallow, 2 nights in a row, but 48 hours later, I think for the most part we're through it. But man, you're just devastated for those seniors that played their last games. Yeah,
definitely, man. It was a roller coaster ride, man. And you starts the postseason out 0-0. Everybody's looking for fantastic things, but you know, it started with that upset of Purdue in the first round, a 1-16 matchup, and you've seen it coming, you've seen it bubbling. And it's a tournament that was more wide open than any other tournament that I've seen in recent memory, which makes it all the more disappointing as to why, if we could just get past that second round, get into that Sweet 16, anything can happen. But we did manage to get that done. But what we'll do is, man, we'll start with, you know, the first game of the tournament with versus Kent State. You know, I think they come out to a 71-60 victory over Kent State. I'm not even going to lie. I watched the game, and I wasn't really impressed with how we won the game. I thought that we did a good job defensively. But once again, those same issues continue to rear their head. You can see them knowing that the pressure was going to ratchet up in the next game, whenever that was, that following, that same Saturday. And I could just see the lack of consistency from our guards, the lack of consistency making shots. I believe we 5 of 14 from the 3-point line. The only thing that I believe that really saved the Hoosiers in that game was a breakout performance from Race Thompson. I think Race finished with 20 points and 9 rebounds. And if you take away those 10 and you give him what he was getting over the last couple of weeks, then you have yourself a totally different game. But Race was able to come out and take advantage of a small Kent State front line. Kent State attempted to battle. I think they did a good job forcing their premier guard into tough shots. But at the end of the day, we have to score points. We scored 71 points against a Kent State team that's a MAC school and should be pretty easy for us to score against, man. I thought our defense was incredible. Took their leading scorer out of it. We never let them get comfortable. Trace Jackson Davis had a nice line, 24 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists. But I expect you to have that type of line when the other team just has no front line at all. So, you know, but him and Race dominated. They combined for 54 points and 20 rebounds in the game. And I just don't know how you overcome that. My downside of that game was JHS only scoring 8 points in that game against a very, very small backcourt. And these are the things you're looking at as an athlete when I'm sizing myself up against other athletes. How would I play against those guys? One thing that I did, me personally as a player, is I dominated small guards. Like, you really had no chance if you were a small guard, because I was going to elevate, I was going to work you, I was going to jump over the top of you. I was going to contribute that night if it was small guards on the floor. You had to have big guards to neutralize. And with JHS only scoring 8 points, it just solidified his up and down. And I just wonder was all the rumblings about the first round in the draft. Was that stuff starting to really take a hold of JHS, because and what also hurt JHS is his inability to get rested throughout games. I mean, you're not going to play guys, and Trace too, you're not going to play guys 38, 39 minutes per night in physical basketball game, expect them to produce at the high level, especially guards. Trace is able to produce. I mean, there's not many big guys out there that can do what he do, but JHS has to use energy. He has to handle the ball. He has to guard other guards, fight through pick and rolls, play pick and rolls, push transition, and make shots. So there's a lot to ask for a freshman, man. So I know that was a low, but you think back to that Kent State game, what were your thoughts on the performance that IU had?
It was dominant. I thought really from start to finish, this was a team that it proved their experience paid off. That was the first thing that came to mind. And that first 4 game last year, I know everyone wants to say, oh, it's a game at 12 versus a 12. It's not a real game, whatever. It shouldn't count as a real March Madness win, blah, 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 blah. That's, I think, the real reason why Indiana won that game. And I know people were saying Kent State was a bad matchup. I thought they were not a very good team. But you could tell the pressure got to them. And the experience that Indiana had last year, mainly basically everyone in the starting five, other than JHS, and I think that proved why, based on his shooting performance, the experience matters in those games like that. And a late start, I mean, the game didn't start till like 10:30. It was ridiculous. It was a late night game on Friday night. You're the last team to play. I understand, everyone wants to just get out there. And they dominated. They played bully ball, Indiana did, for 40 minutes. Never let off the gas pedal. And it felt like the Wyoming game. I know at times it was low scoring, but it just felt like Indiana had it the entire way. Their foot was on the gas pedal, and they were not going to, allow it to go the other way. And just the experience I thought mattered for Indiana the most. And a full 40 minutes of basketball only translating to an 11-point win may have raised some eyebrows. But I think just they played the way they needed to. They absolutely demolished Kent State down low, and they didn't really have a true big. And it was great to see Race Thompson have that game that I think for him, he really needed to, I don't want to say cement his legacy. I mean, he's been one of the better Indiana basketball players as of late. I mean, for a guy who's been here for 6 years, and he's been incredible, just the work ethic that he's had. That was a big game for him, and just be able to take some pressure off Trace Jackson Davis, who set a record, by the way, first guy ever to have 20, 10, 5, and 5 assists and blocks since blocks became a stat in 1985. So that's unbelievable for Trace to, have another, record game this season. But it was bully ball from start to finish. They dominated from the very first minute. We hadn't seen that really a lot this season or last season. I think everyone knew that if Indiana wanted to go on a run in this tournament, they'd have to play a full 40 minutes of basketball every single game. And we saw that in the first game against the Golden Flashes, who, missed a bunch of layups early on. And you could tell that I think the pressure just got to them. And Indiana, I thought, did a really good job of neutralizing, as you mentioned, their guards. Carey had an awful game. He had that one insane 3 at the end of the shot clock, and I felt like that was it, really, because they chased him off the 3-point line, and they had the guys down low. They were quick in terms of, at least putting pressure on the Flashes when they wanted to get to the basket. So that was important. And for the first time, I felt like really at all this season, they played, at least since non-conference play ended, they played a full 40 minutes, and it translated to a really good win from start to finish.
Absolutely. And, that the win versus Kent State earned IU an opportunity to play the second night in the round of 32. Where they drew a Miami team that I had watched a little bit before. I forget who the opponent was prior to Indiana, but I just remember they played awful. And when I was watching that game, I was like, man, if we can play Miami, we might have a chance. You know what I mean? And what I didn't expect to happen actually happened. Is Miami was a very, very hard playing basketball team. They were very tough-minded, and they have the guards that I've been talking about for the last few years. I mean, they just have guys, you didn't see them running plays for them. You didn't see them doing too much. They were patient in and inside their offense. They moved the basketball and it got in the hands of the right guards, and they just created opportunities for their teammates, man. We ended up losing that game 88, is it 88 to 69 or something 85. Like that, 85 to 69. I'm sorry, 85 to 69. Omier dominated. To me, Omier was the difference. In the first half, he didn't play. Indiana was extremely comfortable. Omier came out, he got underneath Trace a little bit. He made Trace work a lot more, but he helped the Canes out-rebound Indiana 48-31. And I thought I haven't seen that much this year, especially with Race and Trace in a game together, to get out-rebounded by 17. I think Omier had 17 rebounds himself, along with the patience of their guards and the aggressiveness of their guards and their ability to attack, get to the rim, make outside threes, make Indiana's guards work and uncomfortable. They got into JHS. They made Mar Bates go 0 for 4 from the three-point line. Miller Kopp, he hit a couple of threes. I believe it was 2 or 5 from the line, knocked down 2 threes. So, I just felt like that with the aggressiveness on the boards and the aggressiveness of their guards was a major difference. What did you see as major differences in that game?
Simply, AJ, the Hurricanes had quicker guards. They had quicker guards that could, get to the rim when they needed to. And it was I don't want to say a similar setup to Kent State, but, without a real big man again down low, there was a ton of space. And whenever, they missed a shot, they crashed the boards. Indiana did not box out at all in that game. And I mean, the fact that as a total, Indiana had 12 offensive rebounds. Omier and Wong combined for 12. Their two best guards. Wong was unbelievable, 27, and Nigel Pack, an Indiana guy who said he was excited to go up against Trace, had 12 points, I think, a really good first half. So it's the quicker guards that have beaten Indiana all year. And I mean, Indiana just got demolished on the boards and could not save them. I mean, it felt like Miami had so many second chance points that eventually it felt like that was the difference. 29 second chance points. Mm-hmm. That's you're never winning that game. Simply put, they went down 8-0 again, and whenever they could get back in it, they had expended all of their energy in that second half of that really nice run out of halftime, and no one had it. And I think this goes back to what we've been saying all year. Indiana's not a team that's comfortable shooting 20-plus threes in a game. I don't remember the last time they've done that in a game. I get it at the end. They had to chuck up some shots. JHS had 3 in a row, which I think it made everyone's mouth drop and probably, helped his draft stock a little bit. But other than that, it's just this is not a team that's comfortable, getting down and crawling back into ball games because they have not been able to shoot enough threes this year to keep up with opponents. And it was what really hurt them was the glass. It was not the threes. It was the second chance points and the easier ones. And there was no boxing out. The physicality that we had seen against Kent State was not there at all against a seemingly smaller but just quicker Miami team. It's been this way all year long, AJ. We've talked about it. Quicker, better guards are going to beat this IU team. And what sucks is they beat them on the glass. Fine, hit your threes and hit tough shots and all that, but to beat them on the glass is not the best way to go out. But I think they ran out of gas. I was not expecting them to get past. It was Drake, the team that Miami beat, which I had going to the Sweet 16, and I thought Drake had it. With 3 minutes left, man, I was feeling good. And then Miami came back out of nowhere to win that game. So give credit to the Hurricanes. They were a tougher matchup than a lot of people have expected, much tougher than Kent State. And those guards are now dancing the Sweet 16.
Absolutely. They earned it. I mean, Jim Larnaga has always been a really good coach. He's always seems to, I even tweeted, I was joking about how him and Coach Woodson was having a stare off. Every time they showed both of them on the screen, they both were just staring and looking like, I was like, man, but it seems like both teams were really getting things done. So, kudos and shout out to Miami for advancing. It just put into the Indiana season. I didn't expect Indiana to win this game either. I really thought that, they didn't have, what's important for me is to see the depth that can help you get through games like this. And if you look at our bench, and I'm not sure, don't quote me on this, but I think Bates had 0 points. I think Renew may had 3 or 5 points. I mean, we're talking about our bench who absolutely did pretty much nothing in the game. And you cannot win games like that. Geronimo was non-existent. They put Caleb Banks in for a minute looking for a spark. When you see guys you haven't seen in a long time, that's just a coach really digging deep in his bag to try to figure out how to get a spark or how to get some production off of that bench. JHS ended with 19, but he really had 10. If you really think about it, he threw in some threes at the end to make it look good, but he was non-existent. And I think the Miami guard did a great job of taking him out of the game and not allowing him to, get clean looks from the three-point line or clean looks at all. And I think that was a major difference because you need Galloway, Bates, Kopp, JHS, and and race to really produce at a high level in order for us to still be playing right now. That's just the way it is. I mean, 69 points. We talked about that in the season. Is just not going to be enough. I think we just, as a team, just got caught up too much into the inside game, and Trace making all the decisions, and it's just not going to be a recipe for success against a team that plays a team basketball game with 4 or 5 guys that score in double figures. It's just not going to work against those guys. So that was, I think, is our downfall outside of it. Like you said, talked about getting out rebounded, and getting just dominated on both ends of the floor. And unfortunately, season ended. And so what we have left to discuss is, okay, let's talk a little bit of shout out to Trace Jackson Davis on a phenomenal career at Indiana University. He gave his maximum effort. What I get frustrated with is people. It's just me. People get judged upon championships. What I say about that at the college level is college players don't pick their teammates. They get recruited and they commit to a school and they go and give their all to that particular school. Who leaves, who stays, who's productive, that really falls on the assistant coaches and the coaching staff who recruits those players and develop those players. And whether or not you can lead them all the way to the promised land, that's not totally up to you, And so, I commend Trace Jackson Davis. I had a similar situation, and when people would say, well, didn't win a championship. And I was like, it wasn't because he didn't give maximum effort. If you didn't give maximum effort, then is regret. And, I watched the kid go out there, finish top #1 in rebounds, finish #1 in blocks, #3 in scoring. He had his career high in assists this year, and that's something we talked about him improving in, or I did over the last 2 years of this podcast, because I've seen the ability to improve in that area. But he's not coming back, monster career. So, shout out to Trace Jackson Davis for finishing strong and giving his maximum effort to help keep Indiana basketball relevant and afloat. A lot of our TV games we'll watch, one of the most viewed games on Fox, most viewed games in March Madness. People are watching, whether or not they support it or not, don't matter. The numbers are there and they're watching, man. Any comments for you on Trace Jackson Davis's legacy?
Oh, man, it's so hard to now think about because, I've been saying ever since really the calendar year 2023 started, man, you have to enjoy every second Trey steps out there. And you really just never do. You can't, as a fan or a media member, just live in the moment with Trace. And as the cliche goes, you really don't appreciate someone or something until you lose it. I think that was what everyone said during COVID when we didn't have any sports to watch at 7 o'clock every night. And wow, we really appreciated it. And that's just going to happen next year when the season rolls around. You just won't have 23 in cream. But I mean, what he did for this year, this was a huge jump that Indiana made this year. I know it's a disappointing way to go out, but considering where they were last year, 9th in the conference, a team that had to fight their way back in the second half of a Big Ten tournament game to even get in the tournament. And then this year, the big jump, particularly Trace, a massive jump in his game, which, I mean, he didn't need, too much of an improvement to really be an NBA player. And but he took a huge step, physicality, defense, mostly his passing. That was the best thing. I mean, we knew he was going to get the double team every time. Miami did. They even tried fronting him, but the way he passed the ball was absolutely insane this year. His turnovers, I think, were much lower than they were. I think maybe it was around the same just because of the amount of passes he had to make to the outside. But I mean, man, what he did for this program and what he put all the work in because of Mike Woodson and the other coaches who brought him back not only once, but twice to come back and wear the cream and crimson. Hey, he's going to go down as a great. And I hate the whole, he didn't win a championship. Well, first off, he was playing under Archie Miller for a few years. So, no offense to Archie, but there's a reason why Indiana teams didn't do too well under him. And then with Mike Woodson, I mean, let's be honest, Woody really only had one true year, one full year as an Indiana coach, and that was this year because this year was the first time it was his transfers, or rather his recruits being brought in to play. It was really his team for the first time, and look what happened. So give it, hat tip to Trace. All the best for him, man. I know there's a chance he comes back for another year, but I'm not even to think about that. I know he's got an extra year of eligibility, but he'll be off in the NBA draft. Hopefully a first-round pick, we're all hoping, but he's going to do really well somewhere. And, I mean, all the best for him. A pleasure to watch him for 2 years on campus.
Today's episode is presented by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play college basketball's pick'em, where you get real cash prizes simply by picking player stats in this weekend's games. In pick'em, all you do is pick whether a player will go higher or lower in Underdog's projected totals. That's points, rebounds, whatever. If you're like me and you think Marquise Noel is going to go absolutely nuts this weekend, pick higher on his points projection, throw in a couple of other picks, and if you hit them all, you can win 20 times your money on a single game. Underdog's slick mobile app is easy enough that dummies like Jeff Goodman have even figured it out. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app and use the code FIELD, F-I-E-L-D, to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Get in on the madness now. Guys, bad news. My bracket is busted and has been busted since the first day of the NCAA tournament. But don't worry, because if you're like me, you get a second crack at this. Run Your Pool is hosting a Sweet 16 pool for us. There's $500 in prizes on the line for our Sweet 16 challenge. So you get to compete against me and Fanta and Terrence Oglesby and everybody else on the field of 68 one more time. So make sure to check out Run Your Pool if you need to host any bracket challenge or pool moving forward. They have more than 50 game types for every sport that you can think of, from a traditional bracket pool to things like survivor games to head-to-head games, and my personal favorite, squares. Everybody loves squares when it comes to March and the Super Bowl. The scoring is customizable, and you can tailor your rules to your liking. So make sure you go to play.runyourpool.com/field68. That's FIELD 68, and get your picks in before the Sweet 16 tips off.
You know, what I think about, and I've been thinking about this over the last years, like I believe that the Indiana basketball fans, you know, especially the past fans, have to understand that, you know, it's not the 80s anymore. It's not the 70s. It's not the early 90s. This is not, it's going to be very difficult based on, you know, the early entrance. And when we started having a lot of guys leaving early, that started the whole wave of inconsistency when it comes to building a program. And now with the transfer portal and all those different types of things, it's going to be very difficult to maintain being the number one top 10 team in the country. So you made a great point of just, you know, when you're competitive and you protect home court and you play hard, you represent the colors the way you're supposed to represent, that's what people need to stay in that moment and enjoy that, and not think, oh, if we don't get to this level next year, it's over, we suck. It's like, it doesn't work like that anymore. It's just too many different ways for other teams to get better rather than development through recruiting freshmen and things of that nature. So I was really happy with the result. I really enjoy watching Mike Woodson's teams play. I enjoy the defensive connection. Of course, we want to see some improvement in a lot of different areas, but the improvement is going to come with the improvement in talent that is brought in as well, and the approach to talent. I'm not saying Miami's guards were more talented, but their mentality was more aggressive, and that's what we need to see in Indiana basketball. I want to see jump shooting guards that can't get to the basket or create shots for others. You know, they need a pick and roll to create shots for others. Miami was just breaking guys down and getting into the teeth of the defense and creating shots for themselves, shots for others, or getting to the free throw line. And that's what you want to see, in college basketball. So, you know, I'm looking at giving them a grade of a B- for the year. I thought they fought through the year. I thought they would hit some adversity at Iowa, and I thought they went back into the back cave, back into the lab, and really came out a different team with Trace Jackson Davis as their leader. And I think that was a pivotal point of the season, because I think at that point they were 0-3 in the Big Ten. Or 1-4, something like that. They were 3 games behind and ended up finishing in the top 5 in the Big Ten, getting a double bye in the Big Ten tournament and having an opportunity to do something special. So that's all you can ask, is for an opportunity to do something special where you're not always grinding and clawing your way back out to the top. If you had to give the Indiana Hoosiers a grade for this season, what would your grade be?
I said A- after the regular season, which I think a lot of people thought was very high, but I said it, I prefaced it, I was pessimistic. I didn't think, they really deserved number one in the preseason. I know the Big Ten was just kind of a mess this year because of all the talent that was lost. So I don't really think anyone deserved to be number one, but I know the poll has to pick someone. I think they could just put everyone like tied for 5th, like 8 teams, they just could have put them all tied, and who really would have known. But I gave him, I think, a B to B plus. I'm leaning more towards a high B, 85 out of 100 if we're going to be that specific. But I mean, for this season, and I saw a couple tweets about this, but let's be honest, this season, their goal was to finish, I think, in the top 4 in the Big Ten and get a double bye and a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that was when healthy. And they did that at the very end. They got that double bye at the end with that win against Michigan, tied for second, which I thought was really impressive. Man, at 1-4 in the Big Ten, I was pessimistic that here we go again. This might not even be a tournament team without Race Thompson, without Xavier Johnson. But they turned it around. And I said A- at the end of the regular season on last week's show. But I think the fact they didn't get to the Big Ten, tournament championship, the Big Ten championship, and have a chance to play for a trophy was disappointing, considering that I think they had a really good draw for it. But Penn State just turned out to be the hotter team, and I didn't think they'd get there, but I think they definitely should have gotten to the Sweet 16, at least the second weekend. So I dropped them down to a B. But let's be honest, man, they did everything I think they possibly could have. Without Xavier Johnson, the heart and soul at sometimes of the team, the motor, as I've said all year, a guy who was so big and one of the better point guards down the stretch last year in March, which is why they made the tournament. And I think even with Xavier Johnson, they might even still fall short of a second weekend, which I thought was their ceiling going into the season. So, I mean, the guys put everything they could in there without him. And, they dealt with injuries all year long. This wasn't a problem last year, but you had Race Thompson, who you missed. Xavier Johnson played like 2 games in the conference play, and one of them was against Rutgers, which was a terrible loss. And then the other one was Nebraska, where Trace Jackson-Davis just took over. So I think they did everything they possibly could. I think expectations were a bit too high, but in the end, the postseason is what matters. And they came up short on only 2 wins in the postseason, which was less than last year. So I get it, they had to play one last game, but they couldn't go any farther in the Big Ten tourney, and only went, I guess, 1 round farther in the NCAA. So I'll say a high B for this team in the very end. But still, I think you got to be proud of the guys. I think going into the season, Indiana was maybe a bit overrated just because of all the talent they had gained, but it was a talent that returned that didn't do very well last year. And you lost your main 3-point shooter last year, your best one in Parker Stewart. You lost a big man defensively in Michael Durr, a couple other guards behind Xavier Johnson last year as well. So without him, it was tough to see them, meeting expectations, I guess, and going, in that deep tournament run or getting close to a Big Ten regular season or tournament title. So they did all they could without X, and that's why I give them a B.
Sounds good to me, man. You sweep Purdue, you blast Illinois a couple times. I mean, I think you had a pretty decent, successful Big Ten season. You lose to Northwestern twice. You do drop a couple games somewhere that you don't need to. But overall, man, proud of the Indiana Hoosiers and what they accomplished, what Mike Woodson is continuing to build. And I just hope they continue to build on about adding pieces, which takes me to the next segment. We look at returning players, man. I don't know all of them for sure. I know we got some guards coming in, Gabe Cupps coming in, but we have Xavier Johnson is pending. I don't know if he's going to get a waiver. I doubt if he gets one, to be honest with you. But you never know. I mean, everybody's pretty generous nowadays with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year seniors. So let's hopefully we can keep our fingers crossed with that. Got Galloway coming back. Malik Renew, you got your inside guy coming back. You expect him to make a big leap, similar to Trace Jackson-Davis. Not as athletic, but even softer touch than Trace has, so he can do some different things than Trace. Tamar Bates, I thought Tamar was a little bit disappointing this year. He was way up and down. He had some good moments against Kansas. Kansas, but Arizona, a couple of those teams where he scored and knocked down some trays. But, I think he needs to put on just a couple more pounds of muscle and become that 3-and-D guy that Indiana basketball really, really needs. You got Gunn there. Gunn he played a little bit earlier, didn't get a chance late, probably just got to adjust to the college game. A lot of people, and I'm glad it looks like some of these guys exercising patience in that way instead of just jumping ship just because they didn't get a chance to play this year. So get your behinds in the gym. Get in there, get some goals for yourself, get some physical goals, get some quickness goals, get some skill goals, and go out and accomplish those things. Caleb Banks, who we didn't see a lot of, George Geronimo, he looks like a transfer candidate to me. I don't think it's really working for Jordan. If I'm looking at it, I don't think they just know where to play him, especially with the emergence of Banks. And, and you got Younger with Gunn who can shoot, a little bit better. And then you got JHS who probably will be testing the waters going to the NBA, man. So you're looking at that Hoosier lineup, what's returning? What do you think are the key areas for Indiana to really, really tighten up in as we head into, our early next year look ahead?
Well, for me, I'm looking at another wing shooter, and I think the question, I think this season could go down as what could have been season for this Indiana Hoosier ball club. What if they're healthy? What if this, that, the other thing? The question I ask is, what if they had one more wing shooter and Mike Woodson went out in the transfer portal and said he wasn't satisfied enough and got another guy to help, basically shore up and basically be a compliment to Miller Kopp on one end and be that catch and shoot 3-point guy who could be consistent. And I think that's what they need going into the transfer portal, man. Tamar Bates, I'm a bit concerned. I think there's a chance he could enter the transfer portal. I think of all people, Geronimo, I saw put a tweet out. I think he's coming back. I know he dealt with injuries. And he had some really good games, I think, especially when Race Thompson was injured. So now with Race and Trace gone, I could see Geronimo being more of a stretch 4 kind of guy. I don't know if he'll shoot the 3 that much, but he's a bit more athletic. Kind of a freak in that sense. He's quick. If he, better footwork and maybe a bit better control of his, foul issues at times, then I think he could be a really good candidate. But for me, it's get a wing shooter. I think if Tamar Bates stays and puts a lot of work in, as you mentioned, I think gets a bit stronger, gets a bit better defensively. I think just the fact that he's maybe a bit undersized, maybe, forced him to be a bit too physical at times, which resulted in a lot of fouls for Tamar. I think the same went for Malik at times, but he got much better. But for me, it's a wing shooter to help him out. I think Xavier Johnson is going to come back. He's confident. I mean, he didn't even do a senior day speech. So, man, he is really feeling it. And I know the NCAA has been giving a lot of those out in the last few years, probably just because of COVID and all of that. So I feel good. I think he's only like 8 minutes or so over that limit in terms of playing. He didn't play in the second half of the season at all or anything like that. So he checks that box. But for me, it's another wing shooter. I think there's a good chance. I think everyone stays. I think tomorrow's the only question mark I have. I think CJ Gunn, I thought for a moment could enter the portal, but I think he's just too close to Indiana. He's got family who's there all the time. His dad's his #1 supporter. He's there every single game, home or road. So I think if he, another guy who could probably use a few more pounds of muscle to really help him out, because he showed some flashes at the beginning of the season. But for me, just another wing shooter to help out this 3-point team, and more than one most likely, because I don't think Tamar Bates is going to suddenly turn into Miller Kopp and start be a catch and shoot 3 guy, or even take a couple steps and shoot a mid range. Although we did see that a few times this year. So for me, a wing shooter, #1 priority for Mike Woodson, and of course another big man as well.
Absolutely, man. I agree with you on that 3-and-D wing. I think that's the most pressing part for me. I'm not sure that Geronimo can fill that role consistently. So if you can dig in the portal and get that and a stretch 4, I think you're really opening this floor up. I think, Race Thompson, as good as he is and good as he was, I think he kind of helped slow the Hoosiers down, clog up the lane a little bit more than it needed to be. If you can get a good Matthew Meyer type stretch 4, not him, but somebody like to that nature, you're really opening your floor. Another 3-level scoring guard, you're going to probably lose JHS, especially if you lose XJ. Then you have an opportunity to open it up and get a guard that can really, really control tempo, but attack, get to the free throw line, get in transition, knock down a shot when they need to. I want to see them play more up tempo this year. Create more opportunities and run off their defense, get a bit more, get quicker. And that comes with the guard and shoot more threes. I want Coach Woodson to let the reins go a little bit, let those guys, let those shots ride out a little bit more. But I think we're on the same page as what they need. A lot of them just need a good offseason, and they're about to get one. Take advantage of it, man. Live in the gym. Live and capture your process, understand your process, and go at it aggressively. And that's what I want to see, man. And my final question to you, man, is I think you alluded to it earlier. Where do you feel Indiana basketball is? Is it back, teetering, or are we where we need to be?
They're not quite back in all caps, but they're getting there. They're much closer than they were a year ago. This was a huge step for Mike Woodson this year, and it needed to be. I think, honestly, I know people said he was on the hot seat last year. I think after he beat Purdue, no matter what happened, he was staying this year. But this was a big year for him. Let's not forget, he fired an assistant coach we didn't agree with last year. The reason why, we'll never know, just because of the way, Woody handles the media. But he basically said, this is my team. I'm going to bring in my transfers, or rather my recruits, keep the guys that we retained last season, and I'm just going to go with it. He didn't feel like the transfer portal is necessary. this season. But he took a huge jump. The Indiana basketball is on the level, is on the trajectory they need to be. They're not quite on the level quite there yet, but they're definitely a huge step this year. You mentioned it. They won some huge road games last year. They only won 3 home road games last year, true road games, and they were against the 3 worst teams in the league. You didn't have that luxury this year. Indiana had, I think, by far the toughest schedule of really any team in the Big Ten. You look at it, at the end of the year, the 5 worst teams in the Big Ten, Indiana only played them once, which is tough. But they won some big road games. You mentioned the sweep of Purdue, massive. The sweep of Illinois, a team that was supposed to be right with Indiana in the preseason poll, that was massive. You got Michigan on the road. You picked off Minnesota. Xavier is a fantastic win. Xavier of the Musketeers, a team that's still dancing, is really, really good. So a big step forward for Indiana. Not quite there yet, but I think the views tell you a lot. The ratings definitely do as well. And just the way this team played, the energy inside of Assembly Hall, this was their year. And I get it. The ceiling was as high as ever this year, but Indiana is moving in the right direction, and they're where they should be. I think if next year, if Woodson continues to make the right decisions, and if they can just fine-tune a few things here and there. A couple of games Indiana dropped that they probably didn't need to, as you alluded to, but they're headed in the right direction. This was a huge, huge jump. 9 to tied for 9th in the Big Ten to tied for 2nd the next year is no easy feat, especially with how much adversity this team really, really faced this year. Your point guard's gone for 2/3 of the year. Your main, your basically your backup big man, Race Thompson, and your glue guy is gone for a key stretch when they really needed him during that tough losing streak. So, and they had other guys injured as well. Had some other adversity stuff to deal with, but a really, really good year for Mike Woodson. He should really be proud in the end of where he got this club, because a lot of people were pessimistic last year. There were just as many people, I think, had Indiana a bit too high, including myself. But I mean, hey, they did pretty well, and they outperformed my expectations considering where they were in January after that 3-game skid.
Well, you heard it there, folks. Absolutely agree totally, man. Indiana basketball is on the right trajectory. Keep plugging those pieces in. As we talked about, I like the way Mike Woodson is building within his team instead of, going out and just getting a bunch of transfers in the win now system. But you may need a transfer or two to help tighten up some screws in the program and have some safety nets within the program. And let's just face it, those transfers, a lot of more times than not, they don't come in as who people think they're going to be. They come in and become contributors, which is fine. But we need to continue to build from the inside out. That's why this summer is very, very crucial. These guys have to come back and become better at every phase of the basketball game, including their body. So looking forward to it, man. It's been an awesome season. Proud of the Indiana basketball fan base, proud of the Indiana basketball family. I like to welcome Cop, Race, and Trace to the basketball alumni family. So that now they can sit back and talk about the team like we talk about the team. So looking forward to getting them involved and seeing them in the draft and seeing what their careers have ahead of them as well, man. So with that being said, man, thanks for joining, man, the House of Hoosier podcast. Me and my man Austin Platt. Make sure you check me out at Twitter, AJ Guyton 25. Make sure you hit me up with your questions on Facebook. I'd like to know, what do you think the Indiana basketball needs to do to be successful, even have an even better year next year? What changes do need to be made? What type of players need to be coming in? Please drop them in my comment box so we can have that discussion, man. And you can catch our podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Field of 68 Network on YouTube. Make sure you click those links, follow, subscribe, and share. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Hope you had a great spring break, man. And our spring break begins this Friday. So excited about that, man. And we'll catch you next week.
Sounds good. Hey, AJ, of course, I got to say this. A big thank you for having me on this year. A big thanks to Jeff and Rob for bringing me on. A fantastic first year for me. I enjoyed every single week, whether it was listening to some fantastic guests. Feels like just yesterday we were interviewing Trace before the season, and now we are. So I'm excited to work with you again, AJ. It was a great first year to be aboard, and I'm excited for what's next. And of course, a huge thanks to everyone at the Field of 68 for their fantastic work week in and week out. It's the toughest, 5-month stretch it feels like for anyone. They do a fantastic job. So a big thank you, AJ. A huge honor to work alongside you, and I'm excited for what's next.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys, man. And House of Hoosier, we are out.